Hi, everybody. Welcome to Two Off the First. It is January the 28th, 2026. I'm Ryan Ballingy. Thanks for being here. Didn't get to do shows last week because I was at the PGA Merchandise Show down in Orlando, Florida, and a little off kilter this week on schedule-wise because if you are anywhere, it's been in the path of the storm that affected a lot of people in this country. Your kids are probably off school, and you've probably shoveled a boatload of snow. In our end, I had to break up blocks of ice like I was a boat going through the Arctic Ocean, using my industrial ice scraper floor scraping product. It worked great. Took forever. I'm exhausted. Probably lost 5 pounds, but here we are. So things are kind of a little off kilter. But we've got 2 topics for you to talk about today. Brooks Koepka obviously coming back is the big story of the week. The Farmers Insurance Open. And then we're going to talk a little bit. I think we'll touch a little bit on Patrick Reed as a result of that, but also want to talk about some comments Nelly Korda made to Beth Ann Nichols at Golf Week regarding WTGL and just kind of thoughts on maybe a missed opportunity there as she sees it and whether she's going to get involved in the first place. But let's start with Brooks Koepka, who makes his PGA Tour return this week at the Farmers Insurance Open. He resigned from Live Golf, or I guess mutually they agreed, Live Golf and Koepka, to allow him out of his contract. What was it, a couple days before Christmas? And then he said yesterday his first phone call after was to Tiger Woods, which I thought was very interesting. He kind of gave some illumination on why he made that call. He's always got along with Tiger. They've had great conversations. He didn't know Brian Rolapp. He thought maybe my next call would be to Jay Monahan, who's really more ceremonial at this point, but he wanted to kind of go and see what was possible. He knew that anything could be in the range of possibilities. Could be, hey, welcome back. Could be, you're suspended for 5 years. Go figure it out. And it was very interesting the way that he spoke. I mean, really under no pretense. I mean, there's no kind of fake tough guy act. I mean, he's a quiet personality to, in the first place publicly, but there was no kind of bravado about it. I thought that was very interesting. And I haven't heard Brooks Koepka really talk in a long time to the media, or really to anybody for that matter, because I don't pay a ton of attention to Live, and a lot of that stuff just doesn't get TV time, and there's really not a whole lot controversial said on Live or anything really interesting said on Live, unless it's about Live and the PGA Tour. And Koepka said, I'm extremely grateful. My team and my family are extremely grateful to Brian Rolapp and the PGA Tour for working this out and I had no idea I'd be back this quickly. I'm really excited to be back out here. He was genuinely happy to be back. And he said he didn't really remember the first person he ran into. He supposed it was Justin Rose, and had some caddies come back to him and say welcome back, and that he is genuinely nervous about how the fans will react to him coming back. And I think that's warranted. I've seen enough reaction on the Golf News Net social channels when I've posted about this stuff and him talking about coming back, that there are people who call him a traitor, and there are going to be people who do not welcome him back. And there are going to be people also equally excited to have him back and away from Live. And I really am curious what that first tee reaction is going to be tomorrow when he steps up and plays. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know what it's going to look like. I do know it's going to be on ESPN, which I think is also very interesting. For the first time in, I think not quite 20 years, 19-ish years, a little bit more than that, ESPN is going to have PGA Tour coverage on their flagship network. They decided they would take the PGA Tour live feed that they normally have reserved for ESPN Plus and ESPN Unlimited and put it on ESPN Linear TV. I think that was an agreement reached with Brian Rolapp of the PGA Tour, recognizing, hey, we can get a lot of value out of this moment. At least they perceive it to be such, so they want to have maximum exposure for Brooks Koepka coming back. And that means putting the ESPN Plus feed, the main feed that they typically have for PGA Tour Live, onto linear TV from 12 to 3. And then Golf Channel will take it over from there, and they'll do their usual thing. But I thought that was a very curious move to try to get the most out of this. And this is, I think, an indication of what Brian Rolapp is willing to do to work with their partners to try to get maximum value of things that he sees as newsworthy or interesting or compelling to viewership. And I think enough fans have probably gotten in his ear, enough players have probably gotten in his ear in a short time as the PGA Tour CEO to go, hey, we miss a lot of the best players rounds because they're just not in the coverage window, and enough people aren't willing to pay for PGA Tour Live to go watch every shot of Scottie Scheffler or Rory McIlroy. They want it. They pay enough for cable. They pay enough for every other streaming service. They want to be able to watch it on linear TV or whatever subscription they already have. And I think this is an opportunity for Roll Up to say, hey, maybe we can use this to our advantage. Not all the time, but some of the time. And if PGA Tour can get in front of a bigger mainstream audience because of one player coming back, maybe that leads to more of it. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And what Golf Channel, honestly, has to say about it. I think that they can benefit as well, because they can say, okay, well, you already been watching. Come on over to Golf Channel. And I'm sure PGA Tour Live will say, hey, the coverage moves to Golf Channel next. And if you're interested, keep going. And maybe that's a good thing for them. We'll see what happens there. But that's a little bit of a detour. I thought Koepka was very interesting in how he talked about his reasons for coming back. And I know everyone and their mother, including myself, made fun of all of the guys who went to live a few years ago, whether that was in 2022 or 2023, mostly in 22, for saying, I went to live golf to spend more time with my family. I don't have to play golf as much, blah, blah, blah. And Brooks Koepka unironically said, this was a family decision. And that's what brought me back. I didn't feel like I could be out on live anymore. I wanted to be home and closer to my family. When I competed, I want them out on the road with me more when I do compete. And it's hard to do on live because more than half, almost 60-65% of the schedule is out of this country. So they have to go very far just to be able to be with me. I can be in the United States and play on the PGA Tour. They can come with me to most stops, which he said they intend to do. His wife Jenna and his son Crew. And he didn't talk too much about he alluded to it a lot. Things changed in his family situation, stuff that he was going through. And he didn't want to talk about it too much personally. And there's probably a lot of pain behind it. He and his wife, Jenna had a miscarriage, I believe, in September. They were kind of about 4 months into a pregnancy and unfortunately miscarried. And the baby that they were hoping to be Crew's brother or sister passed away. And that seems to have affected them very deeply. I know lots of people. I've been on, my wife and I have been on that journey, maybe not quite to that extent, but I've been on that journey before, and I know lots of people have been too. And most people keep it quiet and don't talk about it a whole lot, but it's really powerful. It's really emotional, and it clearly changed how Brooks Koepka feels about golf and life and golf's place in his life. And I think that was probably the catalyst event. And he went to live and said, look, this is just too much for me. I can't do this anymore. I have 1 year left. I just want out. I want to be home with my family. I don't want to do this anymore. And he gave credit to Yasser Al-Rumayyan from Live Golf, his excellency, the guy who's the chairman of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, and Scott O'Neill, who is now the CEO of Live Golf, for recognizing the moment and saying, look, man, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here anymore. You did enough. We'll let you out of the contract. And I think that he's not the kind of guy to go into those types of things. You can tell he isn't. And, maybe he'll never want to get into those things. But that he made it clear that was the reason why. And that at this stage of his life, he wants to be a parent. He wants to be around his wife and kid. And that was the big motivation. Now, the next part of it is, hey, I'm excited to be out here and compete against Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. I know I've got him. He said that. I know I've got a lot to prove. I haven't played well in the majors the last few years. I don't start with particularly killer status here. I have to earn my way into the signature events. I have to earn my way into the playoffs, those types of things. And that he's excited to try it. And I thought overall, for a guy that really isn't the most captivating public speaker, he was at least revealing. And you don't have to be. You really don't have to be. But he spoke with the media for 25 minutes, and I thought that was commendable. I thought that was interesting. How that translates to a fan reaction, I don't know. I really, really don't know. But I I at least respect that he got up from the microphones and said, hey, I'm nervous I was nervous about this. I'm nervous about how the fans will react. I'm looking forward to coming back. The reason I'm back here is truly because of my family situation is changed in a big way, and I'm grateful to the PGA Tour, Brian Rowlett, Tiger Woods, Jay Monahan, etc., for giving me the opportunity to make that happen so quickly. And one more he asked for from somebody. Yes, he took the money from Liv. Yes, that's going to haunt him professionally for a really long time. There are going to be people he can never win back because of that. And I'm sure that he knows that. He's not dumb. He knows that. So we'll see what the overall fan population thinks about this come Thursday. And I think when he plays in Phoenix, you'll get a much better idea. I think that will be a very welcoming environment for him. He's won there a couple of times. It was a big deal for him to win there. It's kind of an atmosphere that seems to embrace him. So I think we'll get a little bit better of that these next couple of weeks. All right, let's talk a little bit about women's TGL, WTGL. So the LPGA is starting their season this week in Orlando at Lake Nona, where it's like 32 degrees, by the way. I was there last week for the PGA show, and the temperatures were in the high 50s, low 60s. One day got close to 70. I mean, pretty darn nice compared to here, where it's 10 degrees right now. And it's going to be an interesting environment for the Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament of Champions. They've played this tournament a couple of times now when it's cold, maybe not quite this cold, but cold. You've got 39 professionals. You've got 44 amateurs. They pared that down a little bit this year. They used to have 50, I think, because they had more pros say they want to play, and they had so many winners last year on the LPGA. And you get a 2-year exemption in this tournament for winning. So if you win in a year, you get the next 2 years in this tournament. And they just kind of pared down the field a little bit. So you've got Nelly Korda, you've got Gino Tidical, you've got Lydia Ko, you've got Charlie Hall, who was at TGL the other night, kind of promoting women's TGL because she's committed to it. They announced Lottie Wode and Rose Zhang is competing in WTGL, which is supposed to start at the end of somewhere between the end of the 2026 LPGA season in November and the beginning of the 2027 season, which presumably would be about this time in 2027. So the a 2-month period in there. And Beth Ann Nichols from Golf Week, who's one of the very few people who consistently cover the LPGA, and she's probably the only one who consistently covers it at tournaments that doesn't work for the LPGA. She talked to Nelly Korda about WTGL and probably other things too, but caught up with her a little bit at Lake Nona. And I thought the things that Nelly said were interesting, and you should read Beth Ann's article. I'll link to it in the show description. She does a great job just catching up with players and getting them to say what they really think. And Nelly made it very clear. She's kind of torn about how she feels about WTGL. On one hand, it's a great platform. It's an opportunity to reach new fans and connect with new people and promote the LPGA and her personal brand. She didn't allude to personal brand, but promote the product, promote women's golf, and get more eyeballs on it. On the other, she is tremendously disappointed that there isn't some kind of mixed event series where you have men and women competing together, because I think a lot of people figured when the women would get involved in TGL, it would be in that fashion where it would make the most sense to have PGA Tour players and LPGA Tour players playing at the same time, competing together, and you kind of get that rub a little bit. Having that Grant Thornton Invitational when no one cares about golf in December is a nice idea, but having it on prime time on ABC or ESPN or ESPN2 even is a good thing. And that instead they went with WTGL, kind of keeping the women to themselves, she feels is a big miss, big swing and miss, tremendously disappointing. And I completely get where she's coming from. I agree with her. I feel like there needs to be some kind of crossover here between TGL and WTGL. And as I talked about, probably, I don't know if it was the last episode that we did before the PGA show, but talking about the announcement of women's TGL, said, the reason they probably did this was to make money, right? They wanted investors to have separate WTGL franchises, get that money in the door, have that investment, build up that ecosystem. It was more of a financial play from Tomorrow Sports, which owns TGL and WTGL, than anything else, right? That if you had just an extension of the existing 6, soon to be 7 with Detroit's team next year, you're not adding money to the ecosystem. And I have a feeling that was probably the bigger thought was, all right, if we can get rights deals for WTGL separate from TGL, we can also have investment groups that are separate from TGL, even though a lot of the money may turn out to be the same. Then we've got this big multi-billion-dollar product all of a sudden just a few years into existence. And then maybe, and they talked about this when they announced WTGL with the LPGA, they could see crossover stuff down the line. I think that kind of depends on the ownership groups that come in on WTGL. Are they basically just the TGL owners already? I don't know. We'll see about that. I think that's kind of interesting and compelling. I am not sure how that all is going to work out. But for Nelly to come out and say, look, I'm kind of torn about being involved in this primarily because we're missing an opportunity to cross over with the PGA Tour. I love it. I love that she says what she thinks. I love that she has her mind made up about this, about why this is a missed opportunity. And I think she can use this as kind of a bargaining chip. Look, she is the most marketable LPGA player there is, and it's not even close. I know from a fan perspective, the LPGA has a lot of great players, right? We talk about it often. On this show, we talk about it on the Press, which is our golf betting podcast. Talk about it on the website, of course. There are a lot of great players, and many of them have already agreed to play WTGL, 7 of them at this point. Very recognizable names. But Gino Tidical and Lydia Ko and Charlie Hall are just, quite frankly, not recognized in the same way that Nelly Korda is. And that's despite her best efforts in the LPGA, not really taking full advantage of her moment a couple of years ago, winning, 6 in a row, right? They just didn't quite take advantage of that in the way I kind of hoped that they would. But it still made a really good name for her, and people know who she is. And she has done some brand building on the side by going to the Met Gala and looking stunning and being a very marketable person for her brand sponsors, Toomey and TaylorMade and others. Those are good things. She's built a brand and people know her better than any LPGA player outside of the LPGA fan base. So she has some bargaining chips here. And I wonder if she's trying to use this to say, look, I'll play, but only if we get X number of crossover nights with the PGA Tour players, where we have a little mini series or something like that, where you have crossover teams or 2 or 3 matches. I don't know, just something where you get that rub of having PGA Tour players and LPGA Tour players in SoFi Center at the same time. I think that's what she's trying to do. I think that's a good idea to try to do it. I think it would be in Tomorrow Sports' best interest to agree to it, because there's what can go wrong? How does it go poorly? I mean, think about the players who are playing TGL right now, and many of them are incredible, right? But many of them we don't have Scotty Scheffler playing TGL. He's not fooling around with that. That doesn't fit into his process. We don't have Brooks Koepka there yet. We just talked about him for 12 minutes. We don't have Xander. Well, we do have Xander Schauffele, but we don't have a bunch of players competing in this format that could enhance it a little bit at least. And I think being able to say, hey, we can bring in the most marketable LPGA player if we just agree to have some kind of mini series where these teams compete together. Even do a back-to-back, do a doubleheader where you have that happening. I don't know. You could do different things. But you need to have them playing together, and I think Nelly is right to get the most out of WTGL as a concept. You need to kind of... It can be on its own, and I think it's important that as a concept, you say, hey, the women can stand on their own. They can do it on their own. I get the logic behind that. But Nelly is saying, hey, to get the max out of this, let's have the PGA Tour involved. Let's do a crossover. Let's do mixed events. Those are good things. Let's do that. And I think she's absolutely right. So we'll see how that takes shape. We'll see how people react to that. I think she's kind of firing across the bow here. All right, you want me involved? Then we're going to do some things that you haven't agreed to yet. And if not, then okay, I won't do it. It's not hurting me. like I said, she's in that Scotty Scheffler kind of position of strength of, all right, well, if it doesn't fit, I don't have to do it. I've got plenty of money. I've got, she's openly talked about how she's very happy with her team and how she's organized and how she does things, doesn't have to do anything any differently, all right, then I won't be involved. That's fine. We'll see how it goes. And then maybe you'll want me to come in. And I think she's got that bargaining power. So good for her for doing it. We'll see what happens. The Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament Champion starts tomorrow at Lake Nona. Again, 39 players on the professional side, winners from the last 2 years, and also 44 celebrities, which the celebrity thing, all right, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't do it for me. I'm just here to watch great professional golf, but it does attract some people and hopefully gets a good crowd despite really crummy weather in Orlando. And frankly, the entire eastern half of the United States at this point. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. We'll be back toward the weekend with another show. See how Brooks Koepka does these first couple of days, reaction to that. Anything else that comes up, we'll get a flavor of as well. Get a hold of me, Ryan at thegolfnewsnet.com. I'm on social media at Ryan Ballingy or Ryan Ballingy Golf. Not really on Twitter these days, kind of walking away from that, but you can find me on Instagram at Ryan Ballingy Golf. I'm also on Blue Sky if you care about such things, occasionally at ryan.thegolfnewsnet.com. And then our YouTube channel is Ryan Ballingy Golf as well. Golf Newsnet is the handle for pretty much everything. So if you want to follow us on your favorite social media account, we do kind of send out our news stories and things like that through Twitter, but that's all automated. There's not a whole lot of personality behind it, but Facebook and Instagram, and we're Golf Newsnet there. We share a lot of great content, especially video and photography. So thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you a little bit later on in the week. Stay safe out there, stay warm, and we'll talk to you soon here on Two of the First.